Heidelberg Castle is a famous ruin in Germany and landmark of Heidelberg. The castle ruins are among the most important Renaissance structures north of the Alps. The castle has only been partially rebuilt since its demolition in the 17th and 18th centuries. It is located 80 meters up the northern part of the Königstuhl hillside, and thereby dominates the view of the old downtown. It is served by an intermediate station on the Heidelberger Bergbahn funicular railway that runs from Heidelberg's Kornmarkt to the summit of the Königstuhl. The earliest castle structure was built before 1214 and later expanded into two castles circa 1294. However, in 1537, a lightning bolt destroyed the upper castle. The present structures had been expanded by 1650, before damage by later wars and fires. In 1764, another lightning bolt caused a fire which destroyed some rebuilt sections. Before destruction, early history. Heidelberg was first mentioned in 1196 as Heidelberg. In 1155 Conrad of Hohenstaufen was made the Count Palatine by his half-brother Frederick Barbarossa, and the region became known as the Electorate of the Palatinate. The claim that Conrad's main residence was on the Schlossberg, known as the Jetenba ¼ cannot be substantiated. The name Jetenba ¼ comes from the soothsayer Jetta, who was said to have lived there. She is also associated with Wolfsbrunnen and the Heidenloch. The first mention of a castle in Heidelberg is in 1214, when Louis I, Duke of Bavaria of the House of Wittelsbach received it from Hohenstaufen Emperor Frederick II. The last mention of a single castle is in 1294. In another document from 1303, two castles are mentioned for the first time, the Upper Castle on Kleiner Mountain in Berlin, near today's Hotel Mulkenka. The Lower Castle on the Jetenba ¼ All that is known about the founding of the Lower Castle is that it took place sometime between 1294 and 1303. The oldest documented references to Heidelberg Castle are found the 1600s, the Thesaurus Pictuarum of the Palatinate Church Council Marcus Sum Lam. The Annals Academici Heidelbergensis by the Heidelberg librarian and Professor Pythopoulus. The Originum Palatiarum Commentarius by Marcoard Freer. The Tucheria Sebach by Martin Zieler. All of these works are for the most part superficial and do not contain much information. In 1615, Marian's Topographia Palatinatus Rheni described Prince Elector Ludwig V as he started building a new castle 100 and more years ago. Most of the descriptions of the castle up until the 18th century are based on Marian's information. Under Ruprecht I, the court chapel was erected on the Jetenba ¼ Palace of Kings, prison of popes. When Rupert III of Germany became the King of Germany in 1401, the castle was so small that on his return from his coronation, he had to camp out in the Augustinians' monastery, on the site of today's University Square. What he desired was more space for his entourage and court and to impress his guests, but also additional defences to turn the castle into a fortress. After Ruprecht's death in 1410, his land was divided between his four sons. The Palatinate, the heart of his territories, was given to the eldest son, Ludwig III. Ludwig was the representative of the emperor and the supreme judge, and it was in this capacity that he, after the Council of Constance in 1415 and at the behest of Emperor Sigismund, held the deposed anti-pope John XXIII in custody before he was taken to Berg-Chelsheim. On a visit to Heidelberg in 1838, the French author Victor Hugo took particular pleasure in strolling among the ruins of the castle. He summarized its history in this letter. Historic etching from the Alley of Philosophers towards the Old Town area of Heidelberg in south-central Germany. Heidelberg Castle, Heiliggeist Church, and the Old Bridge are visible in the background. Reformation and the 30 Years' War. It was during the reign of Louis V, Elector Palatine, that Martin Luther came to Heidelberg to defend one of his theses and paid a visit to the castle. He was shown around by Louis's brother, Wolfgang, Count Palatine, and in a letter to his friend George Spalatin praises the castle's beauty and its defences. In 1619, Protestants rebelling against the Holy Roman Empire offered the crown of Bohemia to Frederick V. Elector Palatine, who accepted despite misgivings and in doing so triggered the outbreak of the 30 Years' War. It was during the 30 Years' War that arms were raised against the castle for the first time. This period marks the end of the castle's construction. The centuries to follow brought with them destruction and rebuilding. Destruction. After his loss at the Battle of White Mountain on November 8, 1620, Frederick V was on the run as an outlaw and had to release his troops prematurely, leaving the Palatinate undefended against General Tilly, the supreme commander of the Imperial and Holy Roman Empire's troops. On August 26, 1622, Tilly commenced his attack on Heidelberg, taking the town on September 16, and the castle few days later. When the Swedes captured Heidelberg on May 5, 1633 and opened fire on the castle from the Car Paragraph Nixtal Hill behind it, Tilly handed over the castle. The following year, the Emperor's troops tried to recapture the castle, but it was not until July 1635 that they succeeded. It remained in their possession until the Peace of Westphalia ending the 30 Years' War was signed. The new ruler, Charles Louis, and his family did not move into the ruined castle until October 7, 1649. Victor Hugo summarized these and the following events: 9 Years' War. After the death of Charles II, Elector Palatine, the last in line of the House of Palatinate-Simon, Louis XIV of France demanded the surrender of the allodial title in favor of the Duchess of Orleans copyright Anne's, Elizabeth Charlotte, Princess Palatine, who he claimed was the rightful heir to the Simon lands. On September 29, 1688, the French troops marched into the Palatinate of the Rhine and on October 24 moved into Heidelberg, which had been deserted by Philip Wilhelm, the new Elector Palatine from the line of Palatinate-Neuburg. At war against the Allied European powers, France's War Council decided to destroy all fortifications and to lay waste to the Palatinate, in order to prevent an enemy attack from this area. As the French withdrew from the castle on March 2, 1689, they set fire to it and blew the front off the Fat Tower. Portions of the town were also burned, but the mercy of a French general, René Copyright de Fruly de Tessa Copyright, who told the townspeople to set small fires in their homes to create smoke and the illusion of burning prevented wider destruction. Immediately upon his accession in 1690, Johann Wilhelm, Elector Palatine, had the walls and towers rebuilt. When the French again reached the gates of Heidelberg in 1691 and 1692, the town's defences were so good that they did not gain entry. On May 18, 1693, the French were yet again at the town's gates and took it on May 22. However, they did not attain control of the castle and destroyed the town in an attempt to weaken the castle's main support base. The castle's occupants capitulated the next day. Now the French took the opportunity to finish off the work started in 1689, after their hurried exit from the town. The towers and walls, that had survived the last wave of destruction, were blown up with mines. Removal of the court to Mannheim. In 1697 the Treaty of Ryswick was signed, marking the end of the War of the Grand Alliance and finally bringing peace to the town. Plans were made to pull down the castle and to reuse parts of it for a new palace in the valley. When difficulties with this plan became apparent, the castle was patched up. At the same time, Charles III Philip, Elector Palatine, played with the idea of completely redesigning the castle, but shelved the project due to lack of funds. He did, however, install his favorite court jester, Perkio of Heidelberg, to famously watch over the castle's wine stock. Perkio later became the unofficial mascot of the city. In 1720, he came into conflict with the town's Protestants as a result of fully handing over the Church of the Holy Spirit to the Catholics. The Catholic Prince-Elector moved his court to Mannheim and lost all interest in the castle. When on April 12, 1720, Charles announced the removal of the court and all its administrative bodies to Mannheim, he wished that grass may grow on her streets. The religious conflict was probably only one reason for the move to Mannheim. In addition, converting the old-fashioned hilltop castle into a Baroque palace would have been difficult and costly. By moving down into the plain, the Prince-Elector was able to construct a new palace, Mannheim Palace, that met his every wish. Carl Philipp's successor Carl Theodor planned to move his court back to Heidelberg Castle. However, On June 24, 1764, lightning struck the Saalbau twice in a row, again setting the castle on fire, which he regarded as a sign from heaven and changed his plans. Victor Hugo, who had come to love the ruins of the castle, also saw it as a divine signal. In the following decades, basic repairs were made, but Heidelberg Castle remained essentially a ruin. Since destruction, slow decay and romantic enthusiasm, in 1777, Karl Theodor became ruler of Bavaria in addition to the Palatinate and removed his court from Mannheim to Munich. Heidelberg Castle receded even further from his thoughts, and the rooms which had still had roofs were taken over by craftsmen. Even as early as 1767, the south wall was quarried for stone to build Schwetzingen Castle. In 1784, the vaults in the Ottoinridge wing were filled in, and the castle used as a source of building materials. As a result of the German mediatization of 1803, Heidelberg and Mannheim became part of Baden. Charles Frederick, Grand Duke of Baden, welcomed the addition to his territory, although he regarded Heidelberg Castle as an unwanted addition. The structure was decaying and the townsfolk were helping themselves to stone, wood, and iron from the castle to build their own houses. The statuary and ornaments were also fair game. August von Kotzebue expressed his indignation in 1803 at the government of Baden's intention to pull down the ruins. At the beginning of the 19th century, the ruined castle had become a symbol for the patriotic movement against Napoleon. Even before 1800, artists had come to see the river, the hills and the ruins of the castle as an ideal ensemble. The best depictions are those of England's J.M.W. Turner, who stayed in Heidelberg several times between 1817 and 1844, and painted Heidelberg and the castle many times. He and his fellow Romantic painters were not interested in faithful portrayals of the building and gave artistic license free rein. For example, Turner's paintings of the castle show it perched far higher up on the hill than it actually is. The savior of the castle was the French Count Charles de Graimberg. He fought the government of Baden, which viewed the castle as an old ruin with a multitude of tasteless, crumbling ornaments, for the preservation of the building. Until 1822, he served as a voluntary castle warden, and lived for a while in the glass wing, where he could keep an eye on the courtyard. Long before the origin of historic preservation in Germany, he was the first person to take an interest in the conservation and documentation of the castle, which may never have occurred to any of the Romantics. Graimberg asked Thomas A. Ledger to prepare the first castle guide. With his pictures of the castle, of which many copies were produced, Graimberg promoted the castle ruins and drew many tourists to the town. Planning and restoration. The question of whether the castle should be completely restored was discussed for a long time. In 1868, the poet Wolfgang Mahr won Quarter Lev von Kahr paragraph Nix Winter argued for a complete reconstruction, leading to a strong backlash in public meetings and in the press. In 1883, the Grand Duchy of Baden established a castle field office, supervised by building director Joseph Derm in Karlsruhe, district building supervisor Julius Koch and architect Fritz Seitz. The office made a detailed plan for preserving or repairing the main building. They completed their work in 1890, which led a commission of specialists from across Germany to decide that while a complete or partial rebuilding of the castle was not possible, it was possible to preserve it in its current condition. Only the Friedrich building, whose interiors were fire-damaged, but not ruined, would be restored. This reconstruction was done from 1897 to 1900 by Karlsche Currency at the enormous cost of 520,000 marks. Castle ruins and tourism. The oldest description of Heidelberg from 1465 mentions that the city is frequented by strangers, but it did not really become a tourist attraction until the beginning of the 19th century. Count Graimberg made the castle a pervasive subject for pictures which became forerunners of the postcard. At the same time, the castle was also found on souvenir cups. Tourism received a big boost when Heidelberg was connected to the railway network in 1840. Mark Twain, the American author, described the Heidelberg Castle in his 1880 travel book A Tramp Abroad. In the 20th century, Americans spread Heidelberg's reputation outside Europe. Thus, Japanese also often visit the Heidelberg Castle during their trips to Europe. Heidelberg has, at the beginning of the 21st century, more than 3 million visitors a year and about 1 million overnight stays. Most of the foreign visitors come either from the USA or Japan. The most important attraction, according to surveys by the Geographical Institute of the University of Heidelberg, is the castle with its observation terraces. Reflections on the Heidelberg Mythos, the Heidelberg professor Ludwig Gies wrote, in his 1960 essay titled Phenomenology of the Kitschs, about the meaning of the ruins for tourism. Professor Ludwig Gies goes further in his remarks about the ruins. Also gar one quarter Entlia Heinemann raises the question of whether one could restore the Heidelberg Castle incompletely. Near the view from the star one quarter CK garden over the deer moat of the well-kept ruins of the castle interior, he asks himself whether one should not redevelop the whole area again. Chronology, timeline of events for Heidelberg Castle, 1225 first documented mention as castrum, 1303, mention of two castles. 1537, destruction of the upper castle by lightning bolt. 1610, creation of the palace garden. 1622, Tilly conquers city and castle in the 30 Years' War. 1649, renewal of the castle plants. 1688–1689, destruction by French troops. 1693, renewed destruction in the Palatinate Succession War. 1697, reconstruction. 1720, transfer of the residence to Mannheim. 1742, reconstruction. 1764, destruction by lightning bolt. 1810, Charles de Graimberg dedicates himself to the preservation of the castle ruins. 1860, first castle lighting. 1883, establishment of the Office of Building of Castles of Baden. 1890, stock-taking by Julius Koch and Fritz Seitz. 1900, restorations and historical development. Famous residents, the Winter King Frederick V. Frederick V, Elector Palatine married the English king's daughter Elizabeth Stuart. The marriage involved great expense. Expensive festivities were organized and for them he commissioned the Elizabeth Gate at the Peace Garden be built. From October 1612 until April 1613, Frederick V spent nearly a half-year in England, and though only 17 years old, thereby took up contact with important architects, who later undertook changes and new building plans for the Heidelberg Castle. Inigo Jones and Salomon de Courcy, who knew each other well, stood in the service of the English king's court. Courcy accompanied the newlyweds on their return journey to Heidelberg. Jones came to Heidelberg as well in June 1613. Very soon, the building of an enormous garden was tackled. However, the plants were intended for level ground, and the slope of the mountain had to be converted. First earth movements had to be achieved, which contemporaries regarded as the eighth wonder of the world. Under the rule of Frederick V, the Palatine sought Protestant supremacy in the Holy Roman Empire, which however ended in a debacle. After 1619, Frederick V, against the expressed advice of many councillors, was chosen as the Bohemian king. He could not maintain the crown after he lost at the Battle of White Mountain against the troops of the Emperor and the Catholic League. He received the mocking name Winter King since his kingdom had lasted only somewhat more than one winter. With the 30 Years' War, Frederick V entered another phase and became a political refugee. As Frederick V left Heidelberg, it is said that his mother, Louise Juliana of Nassau, proclaimed, "Oh, the Palatine is moving to Bohemia." After his escape to Renan in the Netherlands, Emperor Ferdinand II in 1621 put the imperial ban on Friedrich. The Palatinate was transferred in 1623 to Duke Maximilian I of Bavaria, who also bought the Upper Palatinate from the Emperor. In Renan, to the west of Arnheim, the family lived on saved public funds and the generous support of the English king, initially also of the Netherlands, united by the support of the government. For the remainder of his life, Frederick hoped to win back his position in the Palatinate, but he died in exile in 1632. Elizabeth Charlotte, Princess Palatine. Elizabeth Charlotte, Princess Palatine was the Duchess of Orléans copyright Anne's and the sister-in-law of Louis XIV of France. When the Palatinate-Simon branch of the Wittelbachs died out, Louis XIV laid claim to the Palatinate and started the War of the Grand Alliance, which laid waste to the Palatine. Liselotte, as she is affectionately known, was forced to look on helplessly as her country was ravaged and her name. Liselotte, granddaughter of Frederick V, was born in Heidelberg Castle and grew up at her Aunt Sophia of Hanover's court in Hanover. She often returned to Heidelberg with her father. At the age of 19, she was wedded for political reasons to the brother of the King of France. It was not a happy marriage. When her brother Charles died without issue, Louis XIV claimed the Palatinate for himself and declared war on her. Liselotte wrote in a letter to her Aunt Sophia in Hanover, "So I judge that Papa must not have understood the magnitude of the matter of signing me over. But I was a burden to him and he was worried that I would become an old maid, so got rid of me as quickly as he was able. That was to be my fate." Even after 36 years in France, she still thought of Heidelberg as her home, and wrote in a letter to Marie-Louise von de Geinfeld, "Why does the Prince-Elector not have the castle rebuilt? It would certainly be worth it." The House of Orléans copyright Anne's is descended from the children of Liselotte and Philip, which came to the French throne in 1830 in the person of Louis Philippe of France. Liselotte is estimated to have written 60,000 letters, around one-tenth of which survive to this day. The letters are penned in French and German and describe very vividly life at the French court. Most of them she wrote to her Aunt Sophia and her half-sister Marie-Louise, but she also corresponded with Gottfried Leibniz. Liselotte's upbringing was rather bourgeois. Charles I. Louis, Elector Palatine, loved to play with his children in the town of Heidelberg and to go for walks along the slopes of the hills of the Odenwald. Liselotte, who later described herself as a lunatic bee, rode her horse at a gallop over the hills round Heidelberg and enjoyed her freedom. She often slipped out of the castle early in the morning to climb a cherry tree and gorge herself with cherries. In 1717, looking back on her childhood in Heidelberg, she wrote, "Charles de Graimberg. The French Kupferstecher Count Charles de Graimberg fled the French Revolution and emigrated with his family to England. He applied in 1810 to Karlsruhe, in order to begin training with the Hofkupferstecher of Baden, Christian Hordwang, who was a friend and neighbor of Graimberg's brother Louis. After Graimberg went to Heidelberg to sketch the castle for a landscape, he stayed for the remaining 54 years of his life. With his copper passes of the castle ruins, he documented its condition and put the foundation stone for the Roman castle, which should protect the ruin against final decay. In his house he developed a curiosity cabinet with pieces of find from the castle, which later became the basic pieces of the KURPFA Currency Museum. He, by the way, financed his collection of the Alterta 1/4 Mare for the history of the city and the castle, from his own fortune. It is due to him that the castle still stands. He accomplished also the first historical excavations in the castle and lived a time long in the castle yard, in order to prevent that the citizens of Heidelberg take building material for their houses from the castle outfallow. In order Graimbergs wrote Thomas A. Ledger's the first sources written on the basis written castle leader. A copy of this leader from that 1836 Le Guide Voyageurs dans la Ruine de Heidelberg, was acquired by Victor Hugo during his stay in Heidelberg. This copy provided with notes is issued today in the Maison de Victor Hugo in Paris. Of Charles de Graimberg remains an honor board, which was attached 1868 at the passage to the Alton, the memory of Karl Count von Graimberg, born to Castle Père in France 1774, died to Heidelberg 1864. Heidelberg Castle is home to the largest wine keg in the world. Forecourt: the forecourt is the area enclosed between the main gate, the Upper Prince's Well, the Elizabeth Gate, the Castle Gate and the entrance to the garden. Around 1800 it was used by the overseer for drying laundry. Later on it was used for grazing cattle, and chickens and geese were kept here. Main Gate: the approach to the forecourt takes you across a stone bridge, over a partially filled-in ditch. The main gate was built in 1528. The original watch house was destroyed in the War of the Grand Alliance and replaced in 1718 by a round arched entrance gate. The gate to the left of the main entrance was closed by means of a drawbridge. Goethe Memorial Tablet. In 1961 a stone tablet was erected on a ruined wall of the aviary to replace an older tablet. The inscription on the tablet includes verses by Marianne von Wilmer reflecting on her last meeting with Johann Wolfgang Goethe, written on August 28, 1824, on the occasion of Goethe's 75th birthday. On the terrace a high vaulted arch, was once your coming and going, the code pulled from the beloved hand, I found her not, she is no longer to be seen. This poem written by Marianne von Wilmer, in remembrance of her last meeting with Goethe in the fall of the year 1815, directly across from the Goethe Memorial Tablet, stands the ginkgo tree, from which Goethe gave a leaf to Marianne von Wilmer as a symbol of friendship. The poem was published later as Suleika in Wester Paragraphs Lurcher Diwan. The text of the poem begins. Ginkgo biloba. This leaf from a tree in the east, has been given to my garden. It reveals a certain secret, which pleases me and thoughtful people. Euro Johann Wolfgang Goethe. The letter containing this poem with which Goethe included 2 ginkgo leaves can be viewed in the Goethe Museum in Darwin-Kortersdorf. The ginkgo, planted in 1795, that Goethe led Marianne von Wilmer to in September 1815, is no longer standing today. Since 1928 the ginkgo tree in the castle garden was labeled that it was the same tree that inspired Goethe to create his fine poem. The tree was probably still standing in 1936. Harness Room, the former Harness Room, originally a coach house, was in reality begun as a fortification. After the 30 Years' War it was used as a stables as well as a toolshed, garage and carriage house. Upper Prince's Fountain. The Upper Prince's Fountain was designed and built during the reign of Prince Carl Philipp. Over the gate to the fountain house is his monogram with the date 1738 chiseled in the stone. On the right side of the stairway to the fountain is the following inscription, Direction Elkson Dro Biblina Cvraa Opera Henricl Nabe Funds Hic PR in Sirpa Lis Reparat, versus, PVRIORS Cat VRLT, translation. This work was undertaken under the oversight of Alessandro Galli da Babina and Heinrich Nabe. The inscription a chronogram for the date 1741. Through this fountain and the Lower Prince's Fountain were the water needs of the prince's residences in Mannheim met until into the 19th century. In 1798, Johann Andreas von Traitter recalled this water transport, quote from Hans Kessler, beloved water tower. The history of Mannheim's landmarks. The water quality in Mannheim was so bad, that upper-class families of the court financed this transport of water from Heidelberg to Mannheim. In the princely residence, until 1777 there was a court position titled Heidelberg Water Filler. See also, Hortus Palatinus the Heidelberg Castle Gardens, Gardner Lafreniere section as, Heidelberg Tun, further reading, Victor Hugo, Heidelberg of Frankfurt am Main, Societar Currency TS Verlag, 2003, ISBN 3-7973-0825-6. Harry B. Davis, What Happened in Heidelberg, From Heidelberg Man to the Present Verlag Brausdruck GmbH, 1977, ISBN 0007C650K. References. External links, Schloss Heidelberg, Hortus Palatinus by Salamander Cours 1620, Plans for the Gardens, reprinted text of the Bericht of Praetorius 1613. Audio tour in Castle of Heidelberg, Praetorius as pastor in Dittelsham. Illustrated description of Heidelberg Castle by Mark Twain in the appendix of his 1880 European travelogue The Tramp Abroad, available at Project Gutenberg.